A young black belt, blinded by ego, dared to kick Steven Seagal in the face while he was meditating in front of the entire dojo. But what happened next left him trembling. Seagal did not respond with anger or violence, but with a calmness so profound that it disarmed his pride. That lesson not only changed his life but also revealed the true power of inner control. The dojo was silent, so silent that you could hear the faint hum of the air fan and the soft creaking of the old wooden floor. Sunlight filtered through the narrow windows, painting golden lines on the polished tatami mats. In the center of that stillness, sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed and his hands resting gently on his knees, was Steven Seagal. I wasn't coaching, I wasn't teaching, I was simply being. To an outsider it might seem like leisure, a waste of time, but to those who understood it was the deepest form of training, meditation, the point where mind and body meet in absolute silence. Around him, a few students were cleaning the floor and rearranging the equipment, barely whispering, careful not to disturb their teacher's meditation. Everyone knew the rule. When Seagal meditated, the dojo became sacred ground, but not everyone respected that. At the back of the dojo, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Dante Cruz, a visiting black belt from a rival school. Broad-shouldered, arrogant, and brimming with attitude, Dante had not come to learn but to challenge. He had a reputation, a street fighter with formal training, a man who believed that power was measured by who you could knock down, not by what you could control. And that day he was determined to prove a point. "This is what he does all day," Dante whispered with a mocking smile to one of Seagal's students. "He just sits there." "Wow, maestro, huh?" The student tensed up. "Sensei Seagal is meditating." You shouldn't. That?" Dante interrupted, his voice laced with mockery. "Wake him up. Perhaps in this way he will show us a little of that movie magic for which he is famous." The students looked nervously towards Seagal. He hadn't moved an inch. Dante stepped forward. "You all treat him like he's a god. He's just a man. He's probably afraid of facing someone who's still in their prime." "Dante," one of the older students warned, "leave it. This is not your dojo." "Yes, of course," Dante grunted disdainfully. "Because in their dojo they are afraid of a little bit of reality." She dropped her gym bag to the floor and began stretching her legs, her neck cracking with every movement. His ego filled the room like a storm about to break. Dante began to walk slowly around Seagal, observing him like a predator studying its prey. The master remained motionless, lost in his meditation, breathing deeply and evenly. "Can you hear me, old man?" said Dante. "You sit there pretending to be enlightened while the real fighters sweat in the ring." Silence. Dante's jaw tightened. "You don't impress me," he spat. Silence followed. Dante let out a soft laugh under his breath. "You think you're untouchable, huh? Let's look at that." The other students took a step back in alarm. Dante not one shouted, but it was too late. In one swift motion, Dante spun on one heel, his legs slicing through the air with practiced precision, and launched a spinning kick straight at Steven Seagal's face. The impact echoed like thunder inside the dojo, a dry click of heel against cheek. The sound made the younger students shudder. Seagal's head tilted slightly from the blow, her long hair moving with the impact. And then silence again. He didn't fall, he didn't blink, he didn't even raise a hand. Dante froze, his foot still half raised, waiting for some reaction. Any. But Seagal simply remained seated. Still breathing, still calm, the entire dojo was plunged into a suffocating silence. "What the hell?" muttered Dante, taking a step back. Then very slowly, Seagal opened her eyes. They were calm, too calm, like the motionless surface of a deep lake that hides a current capable of dragging you to the bottom. That kind of calm that freezes your blood. Seagal stood up from his position without making a single sound. His movements were fluid, deliberate. He didn't rush, he didn't boast, he simply stood up. Dante felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine. Seagal looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Finally, do you know what you just did?" he asked in a low, deep, measured voice. Dante smiled, forcing a nervous laugh. "Yes, I woke you up." Seagal's gaze did not waver. "No," he said gently. "You awakened something else." A chill ran through the students who were watching. Seagal took a slow step forward. "I sat here for hours in stillness. You shattered that stillness. And now you will learn what it feels like when stillness strikes back." Dante burst out laughing. "You can talk all you want, Zen, old man. But this is the real world." He lunged forward, throwing a direct, quick, confident punch. Seagal, he didn't block, he didn't dodge, he simply moved. In an effortless movement, he turned just enough to let the blow pass, his hands rising to catch the young man's wrist. It was like being trapped in iron. Before Dante could process it, Seagal twisted, not violently, but with absolute precision. The air left Dante's lungs in a gasp. The pain shot through his arm, pure and sharp. What is this? He murmured. Seagal's hand barely moved, guiding Dante's movement. He didn't resist it, he redirected it. He used his own strength against it. With a sudden twist, Dante's leg lost its footing, and he fell to the tatami with a thud that shook the floor. He blinked, staring at the ceiling, dazed, before hearing Seagal's calm voice. You fight with anger, that makes you predictable. Dante gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand up. You just got lucky. Seagal tilted his head slightly. Luck doesn't repeat itself. He turned his body to the side, without a fighting stance, without raised fists, just relaxed, balanced, present. Try again, Dante said. He growled, charging his fury again, taking control. He launched a high-spinning kick aimed at Seagal's torso. This time Seagal stepped forward, intercepting the movement midway. His hand gently deflected the leg, and before Dante landed, the master's palm touched his chest with an almost lazy gesture. The force threw him back as if he had been hit by an invisible battering ram. Dante crashed into the wall, panting. Seagal's voice was calm, almost compassionate. Power without control is just noise. Dante's pride screamed louder than his pain. Do you think you're better than me? Seagal took one step closer. I don't think you could have been better than yourself. The dojo fell silent again. The students stood motionless, their eyes wide open, as Dante slid down the wall, his chest heaving. The arrogant black belt who had come to test himself now looked like a man who had seen a ghost. Seagal bent down slightly, her voice soft but full of truth. You hit me while I was meditating. That means you didn't attack my body but my peace. He stood up again, imposing. And no man wins against peace. Dante tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. He wasn't just hurt, he was humiliated. Seagal looked down at him, his expression inscrutable. Come back tomorrow if you want to learn what you didn't understand today. He turned around, walked to the center of the dojo, and without saying another word, sat down again with his legs crossed and his eyes closed. In seconds it had returned to its stillness as if nothing had happened. Dante lay on the tatami, the echo of that lesson, as simple as it was devastating, resonating in his bones. He had kicked Steven Seagal in the face, and somehow it was his soul that hurt the most. If you don't want to miss our content, hit the like button and subscribe using the button below. Also, turn on notifications and tell us where you're listening from. Thank you for your support. The following dawn, sunlight filtered through the high windows of the dojo once again. But for Dante Cruz, it could well have been a trial. She stood in front of the sliding doors, her palms already damp with sweat, although the air outside was still cool. His cheeks still throbbed slightly, where his arrogance had cost him a lesson in humility. He stared at the entrance for a long time, his reflection trembling in the polished wood. A dozen times he was about to turn around, but his pride stopped him. Because in the deepest cruelty of it all, beneath the humiliation, beneath the painful blow to his ego, there was something that called to him: curiosity. How could a man sitting silently knock him down in a single move? I had fought in tournaments, in alley fights, even against professionals, but I had never seen such control. He wasn't ready to admit it, but a part of him needed to understand. He pushed the door. The dojo was quiet. The students bowed as they entered, their eyes oscillating between weariness and disbelief. They remembered what happened yesterday. They remembered the sound of the body hitting the tatami. In the background, Steven Seagal stood barefoot on the tatami, adjusting his belt around the black GE. His back was turned to the entrance, calm and deliberate. I didn't have to look to know who had arrived. You're back, Seagal said softly. Dante was frozen. Yes, he replied. Because? The word cut through the air like a knife. Dante swallowed hard. Because I haven't finished. Seagal then turned slowly with that unhurried grace that made even stillness seem like a weapon. What haven't you finished? Asked. Prove it to me. Seagal's eyes held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once. So we begin by demonstrating that you can listen. Dante frowned. Here. Yes, Seagal said yesterday as she approached. You came here to fight. Today you will learn to listen. I don't understand, exclaimed Dante. That's the first honest thing you've said, Seagal replied. The students let out stifled giggles, but Seagal silenced them with a look. Leave him alone, he said. He needs peace. The other students bowed and left, leaving the two men alone under the golden light of the dojo. Seagal gestured towards the tatami. Sit down. Dante hesitated, then stood cross-legged in front of Seagal. Close your eyes, Seagal said. Dante obeyed. Now breathe, continuous. Inhale through your nose. Exhale through your mouth. Feel the air. Dante did it slowly and clumsily. The minutes passed and silence enveloped him. At first it was peaceful, but then the noise made Dante's head start to crawl back. The memory of the laughter, the missed punch, the online whispers calling him the guy who kicked Seagal and fell. I can't concentrate, he muttered. Why aren't you breathing? Seagal replied. I'm remembering the same thing. Seagal corrected himself. No, breathing is life, remembering is waiting. The words hit Dante harder than expected. Seagal's voice remained unperturbed. Tell me, why did you hit a man in meditation? Dante opened his eyes. Because I wanted to test you, said. No, Seagal replied. You wanted to test yourself, only you didn't like what you found. Dante clenched his jaw. I thought I could win. That's your problem, Seagal said as she walked slowly away. Do you think winning means defeating someone? But true martial artists don't fight against, they fight through. Through what? Dante asked, frowning. Through the ego, through fear. Through the illusion that power equals violence. Dante lowered his gaze. You talk as if fighting shouldn't hurt. Or if it hurts, Seagal replied, stopping beside him. But the pain is not in the body, it is in the pride. Seagal took a stand, signaling to Dante to get up. Show me what you did yesterday. Dante stood up uncertainly. Do you want me to kick you again? Yes, Seagal said simply. But this time feel before you move. Dante hesitated. I'm safe here. No, Seagal replied calmly. Dante took a deep breath, stepped back, shifted his weight, spun around and launched his leg in a spinning kick. Just like before, only this time Seagal moved first. His hand brushed against Dante's ankle mid-turn, guiding the movement instead of blocking it. The force was redirected and Dante fell to one side, landing hard on one knee. Again, Seagal said. Dante sat up, gritting his teeth. He kicked again. Redirected effortlessly. He kicked. Redirected. Callous kick. Redirected. Callous. Again and again. For the 5th time, sweat ran down Dante's face. His breathing was heavy. But something strange happened. Every time Seagal guided him, Dante felt a change. He was still moving strongly, but with less anger. Less chaos. She was beginning to feel that her balance was shifting. Seagal's movements were almost invisible, like water flowing around a stone. Do you see it? Seagal asked in a low voice. Dante gasped. I'm still kicking you. No, Seagal said, shaking her head. I'm not throwing you out, you're throwing yourself out. Dante blinked in confusion. You struggle to land a punch, Seagal explained. Not to understand the flow. You are attacking stillness, that's why you always lose. Dante frowned. So what then? If I stop fighting, I win. Seagal nodded slowly. Exactly. The simplicity of that shook Dante. That doesn't make sense. He'll have it, Seagal said. When you stop trying to make him have it. They continued for another hour. Every move Seagal made was smooth yet absolute. Dante's kicks lost their edge, replaced by rhythm. He began to anticipate not where Seagal was, but where she was going to be. For the first time, I wasn't trying to dominate, I was learning to connect. Finally, they faced each other, sweat sliding down both their faces. Seagal stepped forward and gently touched Dante's forehead. Now he said, Are you starting to listen? Dante slowly exhaled. It's different. He wasn't angry this time. Yes, Seagal barely smiled. Then you finally fought like a martial artist. They then sat down in silence, the afternoon progressing and the sun casting a long shadow on the tatami mats. After a while, Dante said, I thought you would hate me for what I did. Seagal shook her head. If I hated every fool who attacked without thinking, I would run out of students. Dante gave a half smile. I guess that makes me a special kind of fool. Seagal's voice softened. It doesn't make you human. But what matters now is what kind of man you're going to be after the election. Dante lowered his gaze. Do you think I can change? I don't think so, Seagal replied. I see. The first day you came with ego. Today you came with humility. Tomorrow you will come with awareness. Dante frowned. And what will happen then? Seagal slowly got up, looking out the window. Then you will stop fighting with me and start fighting with yourself. That night, after everyone had left, Dante remained in the dojo, sitting alone in the center where Seagal had meditated the day before. The silence was deafening, but this time he didn't mock it. He took a deep breath, then exhaled. She felt her heart begin to calm down. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about winning or losing. I was simply breathing, and deep down I recognized something terrifyingly beautiful. The man he had come to humiliate might actually be the only one capable of saving him from himself. The next dawn appeared gray over the angels, the clouds heavy and restless, as if the sky itself sensed that something was about to change. Inside the dojo, the morning air was calm, almost too calm. The faint scent of incense drifted through the room as Steven Seagal stood barefoot by the windows, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes closed in silent contemplation. A week had passed since Dante Cruz, with his excessive arrogance, had crashed against the wall of stillness in Seagal. In those few days, the young fighter had trained harder than ever before in his life, but not with kicks or punches. He trained in silence, in control. Today she was sweeping the dojo floor, her movements deliberate and conscious. Nobody had told him to do it. He simply wanted to do it. For the first time in years, Dante wasn't trying to prove anything. While working, Seagal spoke without looking up. When you fight with anger and force, you feed it. When you face it calmly, it dies of starvation. Dante stopped, broom in hand. I think I'm starting to understand it. Seagal's lips curved slightly into a faint smile. Understanding is easy. Living it is the real test. And what was he right about? That afternoon, a group of strangers entered the dojo. 3 men in worn leather jackets, laughing loudly and mockingly, with the kind of arrogance that comes from chaos, not confidence. They were members of Dante's old fight club. He recognized them instantly. The same ones who had once cheered his brutality. The ones who had suggested he challenge Seagal from the beginning. The leader, Rick Mendoza, smiled as he opened the door without bowing. Well, if it's not the Silent Temple, he scoffed. I hear our boy Dante has been getting monk lessons. Dante froze while sweeping. He stood in front of them. Rick, you shouldn't be here. Rick laughed. Seriously, this looks like it needs some action. You stopped hiding behind the old man. Seagal didn't move. Her presence was enough to silence the room, but the newcomers didn't feel it. At least not yet. Rick turned his smile back to Seagal. So this is the legendary guy, huh? The one who broke Dante's pride. It doesn't seem that hard for me. Go away, Seagal said gently. Rick blinked. Sorry, I told you to go away, Seagal repeated, his tone as calm as a sleeping tide. Rick took a step forward, his smile widening. Are you going to make me, man? Dante stepped between them. Rick, don't. You don't understand what you're doing. Rick shoved him. Get out of the way, traitor. You used to be one of us. What happened to you? Dante straightened up. I woke up, Rick scoffed. You woke up, softy. The other 2 men separated, cracking their knuckles in threatening gestures. Seagal kept his eyes fixed on Rick. Dante, she said in a low voice, this is your lesson. What you do now will show whether you have learned. Dante turned slowly towards him. You're not going to stop them. Seagal shook her head. Are you ready to stand up for yourself? The meaning struck Dante like thunder in the chest. Rick first threw a wild hook, intended more to demonstrate dominance than to strike with technique. Dante didn't flinch. He moved to the side, guiding Rick's momentum past him, letting the man stumble forward. The move was almost identical to the one Seagal had used against Dante on the first day. The dojo held its breath. Rick spun around furiously. Do you think you can play with me? The second thug launched himself with a kick. Dante moved with him, redirecting the leg, twisting the man out of balance. His foot slipped on the tatami and he fell face down. The third subject hesitated. For a brief second, he saw what everyone else had seen. Dante wasn't fighting, he was flowing. Rick grunted and charged again. Defend yourself, coward. But Dante did not defend himself. It moved like water, absorbing, redirecting, neutralizing. Every blow thrown became his own defeat. Every act of aggression fell on deaf ears. The assembled students watched in amazement as Dante dismantled his former team without throwing a single punch. Finally, Rick lay on the ground, panting and defeated, not by strength but by futility. Dante stood over him, breathing heavily but with firmness. Are you finished yet? He asked gently. Rick glared at him with hatred. You're a disgrace. You could have crushed me. Dante shook his head, and then it would be you. The dojo fell silent. Seagal's voice broke the stillness, as calm as ever. Lesson learned. Dante turned towards him, his chest still rising and falling with his breathing. Did you know this would happen? I didn't know that, Seagal replied. Life always gives us another chance to fail the same test. Dante nodded slowly, the truth sinking into his heart. Rick and his friends left soon after, limping and silent. They didn't look back. When the dojo emptied, only those who had trained remained. Dante approached Seagal, who was by the window, hands intertwined. "Sensei," Dante said gently, "I could have hurt them. I loved him. For a moment I felt it. Anger, the old me." Seagal turned her gaze to him. "But you didn't. Did you see the wave and let it pass?" Dante nodded. "I was scared by how easy it would have been to lose control. That's why we train," Seagal said. "So that control is easier than chaos." Dante swallowed. "I think I finally understand what you meant by fighting through, not against." Seagal smiled slightly. "So are you ready?" "Ready for what?" "To teach." Dante blinked. "Me to teach." "You've seen both sides of the road," Seagal said. "Arrogance and peace. That makes you a bridge for others who are still lost between them." Dante hesitated. Emotion caught in his throat. "I don't deserve it." Seagal's eyes softened. "None of us deserve it, but that's why we earn it every day." That night, after Seagal had left for a meeting, Dante remained alone in the dojo. The outside world had grown dark, but inside the candles flickered peacefully, their golden and amber light painting the tatami mats. He sat cross-legged in the center of the room, in the same spot where Seagal had meditated the day Dante kicked him in the face. Now there was no arrogance, no impatience, only stillness. He inhaled slowly. He exhaled. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about movement, not even martial arts. He was simply breathing. And deep down he recognized something terrifyingly beautiful. The man he had come to humiliate might actually be the only one capable of saving him from himself. The dojo was silent that early morning. Outside, the rain fell with the gentleness of a reminder. Even storms know when to lower their voices. Dante Cruz was cleaning the tatami after the night's training. His movements were slow, focused, almost ritualistic. Each stroke of the cloth across the floor was a wordless prayer, a way of giving thanks for having survived himself. From his elevated office, Steven Seagal watched silently. The scene reminded him of something he had seen decades ago in Japan, when he was a student. Stubborn, just like Dante, the moment arrogance dissolves and the soul learns to listen, he descended the steps slowly and silently and approached the young man. "You're staying late," he murmured. Dante straightened and smiled. "I can't sleep," he said. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear your voice saying, 'Breathe, don't think, just feel.'" Seagal nodded. "That's good. It means something inside you is awakening." "Awakening or stirring?" Dante asked with a touch of irony. "Both," Seagal replied. "Sometimes you have to stir the mud to see the reflection in the water." For a few seconds, only the rain hitting the roof could be heard. Dante ventured to ask, "Sensei, have you ever lost control?" Seagal looked at him with a calmness that concealed a long story. "Yes," his voice was deep and measured. "I lost it when I thought violence could resolve what silence couldn't understand." Dante frowned. "So what happened?" Seagal turned and walked toward the window. "I lost a friend." There was a heavy silence. "He was a disciple like you, someone who trusted me. I trained him to be strong, and he ended up using that strength to hurt others." Dante looked down. "You blamed yourself." "For years," Seagal replied, "until I understood that a teacher doesn't teach results, he teaches paths. Each student chooses how to walk them." The young man swallowed. "And what if I choose wrong too?" Seagal turned to him. "Then I'll be there to remind you who you are, not who you were." The sincerity of those words broke something inside Dante. "Sensei, when I kicked you that day, I did it out of anger. Not as a test." Seagal nodded. "I know. You don't understand." Dante took a deep breath. "My father was just like you, always calm, always wise, and I hated him for it." Seagal was silent. "He taught me discipline, but never affection. He trained me to win, not to understand. And when he died, I felt like all I had left was to fight with the world. When I saw you, I saw in you the calm he possessed, and I wanted to destroy it." The silence lingered like an echo. Seagal approached slowly. "So you didn't kick me, Dante? You kicked your father's ghost." The young man's eyes welled up with tears. "And you," he said in a whisper, "do you forgive me?" Seagal placed a hand on his shoulder. "I have nothing to forgive because forgiveness only exists when there is resentment, and I didn't have any for a second." Dante looked away. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of relief. For the first time since his adolescence, he felt free. Free from the weight of pride, from fear, from the need to prove anything to anyone. Seagal took a step back. "We'll train early tomorrow," she said calmly. "But it won't be fighting, it will be understanding." Understanding. Yes, you will learn to read the world's movements. At dawn, the dojo was filled with light. The students arrived and formed up in silence. There was something different about Dante. His movements were fluid without anger. Seagal called him to the center. Today he will teach, he told everyone. The students looked at each other in surprise. Dante swallowed. Sensei-yo, trust, Seagal interrupted. Dante breathed and began. He explained how a defensive movement could be a way of listening, how a fall was not defeat but part of the flow. He spoke with humility, his voice trembling but firm. The students looked at him with genuine respect. When he finished, Seagal approached. You see, he said softly, the teacher appears when the student stops acting. Dante smiled, but just then a metallic sound broke the harmony. The dojo's main door burst open. It was Rick again, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 cameras. He was accompanied by a man in a suit, a local producer. Here he is, Rick shouted, the guy who humiliated me. We're going to show the world who the real champion is. The producer raised a camera. This is going to go viral, the rebellious student said with a cold smile, turning on his legendary teacher. Seagal sighed. Don't seek fame in the pain of others, he said. Rick laughed. The world loves violence, and that's why it's so empty, Seagal replied. Dante stepped forward. Rick, don't do this. Shut up, Rick growled. I didn't come for you this time. I came for him. He pointed a finger at Seagal. The peace guru. I want to see if your flow holds up against a real punch. The students moved aside. The cameras started rolling. Seagal remained motionless, his arms relaxed. Rick lunged with a direct kick to the face. It was fast, powerful, but Seagal didn't move until the last second. His body twisted with surgical precision. Seagal's arm touched Rick's thigh and the momentum lifted him into the air. The impact was sharp. Rick fell to the ground. The dojo fell silent. Seagal looked at him without anger. Power isn't strength, he said. It's control. Rick got to his feet, panting. The camera was still rolling. Cut that, he yelled. But the producer didn't, he was amazed. Dante approached. Rick, stop. You've already lost. The man lowered his gaze, humiliated again, but this time something in his face changed. There was no hatred, only shame. I stammered. I didn't know. Seagal helped him up. Now you know, and knowing is the first step toward peace. The cameras turned off. No one said anything. Only everyone's breathing could be heard. Rick, his eyes red, murmured, Sorry. Seagal smiled faintly. Don't ask me, ask yourself. And when Rick left, leaving the dojo silent again, Dante turned to his teacher. What's going to happen now? Seagal looked toward the tatami, toward the door, toward the horizon. Now the hard part begins, and he said, What's that? Live with what you've learned. Dante understood. Not all battles are fought on the mat. Some are fought in the mind, in sleepless nights, in the solitude of the heart. That night, as the rain continued to fall, Dante sat meditating beside his teacher. Neither spoke, but both knew that the real fight was over and that victory wasn't about winning, but about understanding. The dojo was silent, save for the distant echo of the wind rattling the rice paper panels. Master Tanka, his eyes half closed, watched from the corner. In the center, Steven Seagal still sat cross-legged, breathing calmly. In front of him, the young black belt named Hiroto was still trembling after what had happened. His blow had landed squarely on Seagal's face. Yet the man hadn't reacted with anger or violence. The murmur of the crowd slowly died away as Steven stood up. He did so with an unsettling serenity, as if the blow hadn't even touched him. He adjusted his black gi, tightened his belt, and walked to the center of the tatami. Hiroto's gaze wavered. He didn't know whether to apologize or prepare to defend himself. Steven spoke in a deep, measured voice. When you strike a man who is not afraid of you, it doesn't harm his body. You reveal your own fear. The young man swallowed. No one dared to move. The air seemed to thicken. Then Steven raised his open right hand, non-aggressive. Attack me again. Hiroto hesitated, but pride compelled him. He advanced swiftly, executing a rising leg swing aimed for the master's jaw. But before his foot reached, Steven had already shifted half a step back, deflecting the attack with impossible precision. His arm barely moved, guiding the opponent's force into thin air. The young man's body spun out of control, and before he fell, a firm hand caught him by the neck of his gi. Too much momentum, Steven whispered. No warrior who acts with rage, he finds his balance. He released him gently without humiliating him. Hiroto fell to his knees, ashamed. The nervous laughter of the audience died away at the sight of Steven's expression. There was no arrogance, only compassion. Master Tanaka, who had been the young man's mentor, approached respectfully. "Sensei Seagal, you teach with silence," he said, bowing his head. Steven responded with a slight bow. "Silence is the language of control. Many master the body, few master the soul." The students began to murmur among themselves. They had seen many fights, many demonstrations, but nothing like this. Steven hadn't struck, hadn't counterattacked, and yet he had won. However, what followed was even more shocking. Hiroto, still on his knees, looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "Sensei, why didn't you punish me? Why didn't you show me your power?" Steven knelt before him, matching his height. "Because true power doesn't seek to be shown, son. It is kept, controlled. Only a weak man. He feels the need to prove he is strong." Those words echoed throughout the dojo. Many lowered their gaze, understanding that the teaching wasn't just martial, it was spiritual. But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, the dojo received a visit from a group of foreign fighters. They were champions of mixed martial arts tournaments, known for their strength and brutality. They had heard about the American who preached calm and wanted to challenge him. One of them, a huge Russian named Victor, mocked Seagal's philosophy in front of everyone. Meditation. He laughed sarcastically. "That doesn't win fights, old man," Steven calmly replied without raising his voice. "Then show me how anger wins." The match was authorized by Master Tanaka. All the students gathered in silence, knowing that what they were about to witness would not be a simple fight. Victor advanced like a bull. Each blow was a thunderclap. But Steven didn't face him with force, but with precision. His movements were minimal, almost invisible. He deflected, he dodged, he guided. Every time the Russian tried to land a punch, he found only air. Finally, Steven waited for precisely 1 second. When Victor threw a straight punch with all his fury, Steven elegantly twisted his body, trapping his opponent's arm and taking him to the ground with absolute control. The giant fell bewildered. The dojo erupted in reverent silence. Victor, panting, tried to get up, but Steven didn't attack him. He simply looked at him and said, "You don't need more strength, you need more awareness." The Russian lowered his gaze, touching his chest with something that wasn't physical pain. It was shame. After the fight, Tanaka approached again. "Steven, now they understand why the path of the warrior is not violence, but the mind." Steven barely smiled. "I didn't come here to beat anyone. I came to remind you of what we forget when we let the ego drive." Days later, the young Hiroto asked to speak with the AAS. He found him in the dojo garden, sitting in front of a pond, watching the reflection of the sunrise on the water. "Sensei," the boy said, his voice breaking, "now I understand. I didn't hit you, I hit myself." Steven slowly turned his head and nodded. "And every time you act without purpose, you will do it again. But if you learn to breathe before you react, nothing and no one will be able to control you." Hiroto bowed his head deeply. "Thank you for not humiliating me. Thank you for teaching me without hurting me." Steven responded calmly. "The true warrior does not destroy, he transforms." The sun was beginning to rise, bathing the dojo in golden light. Cherry blossom petals floated in the air. The students who had been watching from afar realized that something had changed. They no longer trained just to win fights, they trained to gain control over themselves. And as the dawn light reflected on Steven Seagal's face, the rumor of that day began to spread throughout the city. Some said that the foreigner had beaten a Russian champion without using force. Others said he had humiliated a young black belt with just words. But those who were there knew the truth. Steven hadn't defeated anyone, he had taught everyone. As time went on, Hiroto became an instructor, and every time he saw a student acting arrogantly, he would repeat the same words that had transformed him that afternoon. True power does not seek to show itself, and so the legend of that man who was punched in the face while meditating and did not respond with fury, but with calm, became a symbol, not of physical strength, but of inner mastery, because a peaceful mind is more dangerous than a fist in war. And Steven Seagal, the man who was humiliated in front of everyone, became the mirror where every warrior had to look at himself before raising his hand. The dojo had regained its usual calm, but something invisible had changed since that day. The air was lighter, the looks more humble, and the sound of training resonated with a different purpose. No one was trying to hit harder anymore. Everyone wanted to understand more deeply. Steven Seagal used to arrive before dawn, when there was still mist over the garden. He would kneel in front of the pond, close his eyes, and meditate as the sun rose. The students watched him from afar, trying to imitate his stillness, but none of them could maintain it for more than a few minutes. One morning, Hiroto, the young man who had once kicked him in the face, approached respectfully. She brought with her freshly brewed tea and a different look in her eyes. "Sensei," he said softly, "last night I dreamt that I hit you again, but this time you didn't move." Steven slowly opened his eyes. "And what happened in the dream? This time I didn't. I just watched and realized I didn't need to prove anything." Steven smiled as if he were hearing an echo from the universe answering him. "So you have awakened, Hiroto." The young man lowered his head. "No, not yet, Sensei. Waking up is not about understanding it, it's about living it." Steven nodded in satisfaction. "Well said. Knowledge without practice is a sheathed sword." During the following days, the training sessions took on a different meaning. Steven began to teach without words. He walked among the students, correcting postures with minimal gestures, observing their breathing, their internal rhythm. He asked them to fight without anger, to attack without hatred, and little by little the dojo ceased to be a field of combat and became a temple of self-knowledge. But not everyone was happy with that change. A former student of Master Tanaka, known as Kenji Sato, returned to the village. He was a feared warrior, a soldier and a champion of underground fighting. He had heard the rumors about the peaceful American and felt insulted. "So now the dojo kneels before a foreigner," he shouted as he entered, his voice filled with contempt. The students tensely stepped back. Hiroto stepped forward. "Show respect. This man has brought more wisdom than 100 victories." Kenji smiled arrogantly. "Wisdom doesn't stop fists, kid. Let's see if your teacher can stop mine." The silence was absolute. Steven stood up slowly, without anger, without fear, walked to the center of the tatami and bowed in a formal greeting. "I'm not looking to fight you, Kenji." "I'm not looking either, Steven Seagal," the other one said in a mocking tone. "I only hit." And he did. His punch was fast, precise, and brutal. But Steven saw it coming before the body moved. He took a small step to the side, letting the blow pass through the air, and placed his hand firmly but without violence on the aggressor's shoulder. A simple touch, but enough to break their internal equilibrium. Kenji fell to his knees, confused. "Your body fights against what your mind doesn't yet understand," Steven whispered. The entire dojo was paralyzed. No one understood how one man could control another without hitting him, but Steven didn't celebrate. He helped him up and offered him water. "I didn't come to defeat you, Kenji. I came to remind you that there are battles that are not won with fists." Kenji lowered his head, breathing with difficulty. "I don't understand it." "Why didn't you attack me?" "Because you already did it yourself," Steven replied. "You were hurt by your own pride." Silence turned into respect. Some students had tears in their eyes. Master Tanaka himself, deeply moved, stepped forward. "Steven Seagal, you have restored honor to this place." But Steven gently denied it. "Honor is never lost, teacher. We only forget when we let the ego speak louder than the spirit." That night, while the dojo rested, Hiroto approached again. "Sensei, why do all those who challenge you end up regretting it?" Steven looked at the lit candles illuminating the tatami. "Because they were trying to measure something that could not be measured." "Calmness is not defeated, it is learned." The young man smiled. "So you never feel anger?" Steven stared at him with the depth of someone who has seen too much. "I'm sorry, but I won't let her speak. Rabies is an inevitable visit. What you decide is whether you serve him tea or close the door on him." The words lingered, etched in the boy's mind. Weeks later, a letter arrived. It was an invitation to an international tournament. They wanted Steven to portray Al Dojo in a special exhibition. Tanaka encouraged him to accept. Show them what true discipline means. But Steven just smiled. "You already know that, teacher. I don't need to prove it in an arena." "Even so," Hiroto insisted. "Sensei, not for you, but for us, so that the world can see that strength does not need violence." Steven watched him for a long time and finally nodded. On the day of the tournament, thousands of spectators filled the stadium. Facing him was a European champion, young, strong, and full of arrogance. His name was Eric Mueller. She walked toward Steven with a mocking smile. "I've seen your videos, old man. It's all theater. Today I'll wipe that calmness off your face." The fight began. Eric attacked furiously, spinning, kicking, and punching relentlessly, but Steven barely moved. He seemed to float, deflecting each attack with minimal movements. There was no effort, only control. Suddenly, Eric threw a front kick and Steven stopped it with his open palm, motionless. The European's muscles trembled at the contact. I couldn't move forward. It was as if his strength had dissolved into thin air. Steven looked at him and said calmly, "When you fight someone who has already made peace with themselves, there is no possible victory." The audience fell silent. Eric lowered his head, breathing heavily, took a step back, and bowed deeply. "Sensei, teach me." Steven nodded. He didn't need words. That day the world didn't see a fight. It saw a lesson. And when the event ended as applause filled the stadium, Steven simply sat in the center of the tatami, closed his eyes, and meditated again. Because for him, true victory wasn't in the applause but in stillness. The tournament announcer approached with a microphone. "Master Seagal, what message would you like to leave with the world?" Steven slowly opened his eyes and replied, "Don't fight to be feared. Fight to be respected. Don't seek to defeat others. Seek to master yourselves." And with that, he stood up and walked toward the exit without looking back. That night, as the plane carried him back home, Hiroto, sitting beside him, said, "Sensei, do you think I'll ever attain your peace?" Steven smiled, gazing out the window. "When you stop searching for it, you'll find it." Silence filled the space between them. Outside, the night sky shone with stars because, in the end, the man who had been punched in the face while meditating had taught the world that a peaceful soul is more powerful than any black belt. And so he became a legend not for fighting but for not needing to.